So how I make the ear warmer that doesn't have like a knot or a twist or a scrunch to it is how I make the infinity scarf. It has the same steps but with just left rows. So I'll show you step by step how you can make one for yourself. And what's really nice with these ear warmers is they can also be worn as like a neck warmer or cowl. So to get started, I'm going to use the I Love This Yarn brand, the print collection in the cobblestone ivory. This is a number 4 medium weight yarn, and this is a thicker medium weight yarn than other number 4s, so it needs a little bit more tension. So I like to put it in a bowl. This is a serving basket that I have that works really well if I pull it from the middle of the skein, but you can also roll your yarn in a ball or cake it. That will help too if you're having issues with dropped or skipped stitches. And then I put it on the ground and right in front of the machine. And the first thing we're going to also need to do is put on some waste yarn. So I start at my white needle and I go over and under each needle to cast on one time around. And you don't want this really loose and you don't want it extremely tight either. Once you get one time around back to your white needle, you want to put it all the way down in your yarn holder, and then I'm putting it in the middle circle of the tensioner, and I'll do between 7 rows of our waste yarn. And this needs to be in a similar weight yarn in a contrasting color from the project yarn. Once I'm back to the white needle, I start on the left side of the white needle and I put in my project yarn. And again, I have it all the way down in the yarn holder in the middle circle of the yarn tensioner. And I just zero out my counter. And I'm going to do 80 rows, and I do have this yarn on the ground, so it gives it that little bit more tension that it needs for the yarn not to tuck or drop the stitches. So you could do between 80 and 90 rows just depending on your head circumference. The 80 rows seem to do good for about a adult female 21 to 22 inch round circumference head. So you'd want to do, if it's a larger head, you'll want to do a few more rows. And if it's more of a child's head, you want to do less rows. If you're if it jams at all in your machine and it won't turn, you sometimes maybe have to pick up some of that yarn to give it a little bit more slack, especially since I'm pulling it from the middle of the skein. Sometimes when it first starts to go, it just needs a little bit less slack until it starts getting a little bit less. And that's why sometimes caking or balling the yarn works a little bit better as well. Now, once we get as many rows as you want done for your ear warmer, that you will end up finishing the project again with your waste yarn. And so then I end it at my white needle, and I almost went a little bit too far past, but I didn't go all the way. So once I ready for my waste yarn, I end it at my white needle, and then on the left side of my white needle, I'm adding in my waste yarn. I'll just have to be a little more careful and pick up a needle since I went a little bit past to make sure it gets in there. And then make sure you have it fully seated down into the yarn holder so those needles can grab the yarn. And then for the end of the waste yarn, I'm going to do again like between 5-7 rows of the waste yarn. And then if it's a small enough ball of yarn that you're using, you can just let it run out, and then after 2 cranks around, it will just fall off of the machine. So it makes it really easy to remove. So now here's the width. Since we're using the 48 needle circular knitting machine, it's 7 inches wide. And then if you were using the 40 circular knitting machine, it will be 5 inches wide. So just so you can see that difference, that's on the width. The number of rows is the length, and that's for the circumference to go around your head. So it's always going to be that same width depending on which machine you use. So now we want to close our tubes together, and so we're going to take both ends of the tubes, and I start where it's the tail ends of the yarns are together. I line them up on either side of the tubes, and then we're going to use the first row of our project yarn that's sandwiched in between the pink of our waste yarn. So right here you can see there's that row of brown that's in between the pink. It's kind of tight up at the top there, but you can see it right there. So that's all the yarn we're going to pick up there. And then on the other side, it's kind of that tan and sand color that's sandwiched. In the pink, we're going to pick up both of those rows and pick up each stitch on either side. And then we're going to slip stitch it back and forth, kind of making an X all the way around our tube till we get back to the front. And so I'll show this in real time so you can see how to do this. And then I'll do a few close-ups as well. And they'll kind of twist the headband, so you kind of want to untwist the project as you work your way in the round. And then I feel this just makes a really nice clean finish. And this is one of the reasons also why you want to use waste yarn that's a different color. One, so you can see where your first row of that project yarn is. And also, if you notice, the pink kind of curls because it's where it starts or it stops on the machine. And it also has looser stitches. So by using the waste yarn, it's easier, one, to see which yarn of your project you need to pick up and secure. But it also keeps it that nicer, ends up being a nicer finish and keeps the stitches tighter for the project, because when you get to the end, it gets looser. Now, when we get to the part where we have the tail ends of our project yarn, we're just going to slip stitch those into the projects as well. So we continue to take up the stitches back and forth, and when we get to a tail end, you just kind of hold it and do a loop, and then hold the tail end, and then go to the other side and pick up the next loop and back and forth, and then you'll end on either one of the tail ends of the working yarn, and then you can just pull it all the way through, and now that has secured all the stitches. If you see any big holes at this point where you've slip stitched something together, you've missed one of the stitches, and you want to make sure every single one's secure, because once we remove the waste yarn, then you're no longer going to have anything holding those stitches. They're live. So if we remove it without securing that stitch, it will unravel the project. So now we can just remove our waste yarn from our project. And I just kind of like to roll it. And you can also use a ravel cord to remove your yarn a little bit easier. I have another another TikTok and YouTube video showing how to use the ravel cord method. I just didn't do it for this one. And then once that's complete, then we just have to work in our two tails of our yarn. And so I kind of tighten them a little bit to pull them closed, and then we kind of sew it in together if there's any little opening, and then we just weave in our ends and cut off any extra. And where I kind of weave it in and tie them together, that will be the inside of the project. And so I just flip it around, and now your ear warmer is complete. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy this tutorial. Please like and follow for more videos, and thank you so much for all of your comments and questions. Happy crafting.